like to reintroduce Minter. Minter, we've got our fingers crossed that you're
I
flexible
should
and
be
you can.
live.
Oh, you are live. Welcome back. Thank you.
Not sure what happened with that. Well, in any event, Big Ben is in my background. Welcome and hello from London, England, where I'm calling in from. So I don't know to what extent you heard what I said before, but I'm going to just presume nothing happened. So I'll start from a scratch, if you will, and share my screen. So I let's get that up and running. It's full. There we go. So I practice the empathy circle now for about 10 years, and I've probably done over 200 empathy circles in my life. Oftentimes, what I'm trying to do is introduce empathy into the world of business, which is where I came from. I worked in, well, for 25 years, I was working in big businesses. I've also started up 4 companies. So I've had the chance to exercise empathy within a business context, as well as at home, of course. I've written a couple of books on the topic of empathy. But specifically, what I wanted to talk to you about was the practice of the empathy circle that I use in the middle of a business seminar. And this is a business seminar I've been running for about 2 years now. I am considered an expert for a group called the APM. And the APM have a what they do is they bring me in once a month to or more than that to a group of 20 to 25 entrepreneurs, and I talk about them about how to try to create a more empathic culture in business. And I also then try to blow their minds and talk about notions of the humanization of AI and the specific ideas and state of the art of encoding AI as, with empathy, which is quite a fascinating space and a very evolving space. And then in that, I'm looking at what exactly is empathy, because that's what you need to do if you want to encode it. And what does it say about our society that we would like to delegate empathy into AI? So much, I try to, let's say, stimulate ideas as I talk about this to this group. There are 400 of these clubs around the world, and I've done sessions in Hong Kong, China, Singapore, the Middle East, Turkey, also in Africa, and all the other francophone countries in Europe. And it's a fascinating thing because these are people who are absolutely operational individuals, all CEOs running companies from anywhere from 1 million to usually the largest is around about 100 million euros in size. So when I start out, one of the things I like to do is ask them what is their level of empathy before having explained it or anything. This does 2 things. First of all, it gets them thinking about actually what is empathy and how often they have misinterpretations of what it is, or at least different interpretations. And the second thing is to make them aware of their need for empathy. Specifically, what I do is I ask them after that, to what extent do you believe you're empathic? And in this is a survey I've done over 1,000 times, which shows that around about 73% of people believe that they have an above average level of empathy. And of course, I'm not a mathematician or statistician, but that would seem to be implausible. And the idea here is to show that, well, if you actually want to improve your empathy, you need to have self awareness. And if you think you're already truly the best empathic, well, then you don't have the incentive, the motivation to actually want to improve. I also ask them about whether they have above average listening skills, which, as Edwin knows, is really the central piece, this empathy circle and active listening. And most people will tend to think again, oh, I'm really good at listening. I bring them through I try to bring them in an casual way. So I bring them in and talk about this notion of perspective. Of course, you have your perspective, but is it the same perspective as everyone? Are we at the bottom or are we at the top of this building? I tell them, I take them through this image, which everyone's probably seen. Do you see, what do you see? People see images differently. I tell them about this famous dress. People see different colors. Then I bring them through the Yanni laurel, which well, I didn't put the sound button, but it basically, some people hear Yanni and other people hear of the exact same word, Laurel. You can check it out on this thing. But the point being that we see different images, we see different colors, we hear different things, and this contaminates what's being said on the other side. So I then will like to talk about the art of reformulation. And in business, pretty much everybody went through sales training somewhere, which talks about the art of reformulation. Oh, yeah, I know what that is. But very few of them actually still practice it. It's something that's sort of almost contained only in sales. So I bring them through what that is, what is the art of reformulation. And this is part of the introduction into the empathy circle. So finally, we get to the empathy circle, and understand that this is in a full day from 9:30 to 5:30. And I want to have, I'm obviously bringing them content around empathy as well at the very end about empathy and AI, but I have a number of exercises, and I do this exercise, the empathy circle, in that day. And I only do a 30-minute exercise, which of course is not optimal. But it's already difficult to, let's say, tax these individuals who are supremely busy CEOs, always running after time, and also running after listening. But the idea then is to make them experience. I tell them, I take them through what it is, and I want them to
You have
feel.
actually 1 minute. 1 minute, Minter.
Oh,
I think we have more time, Ruth. We have actually till the top of the hour now because others went shorter. So go ahead.
Oh,
lucky
appreciate
for
that.
me.
Thank you.
I had my timer telling me I had 8 minutes and 30 seconds left. In any event, this is the idea. I bring them through and I tell them to experience it. And then I make them go around and in groups of 3 or 4 only, where they have to choose a scribe, someone who's going to keep notes of what's being said, and the timekeeper. Only do this for 30 minutes, which essentially gives them, and I tell them to do it in bursts of 3 minutes. So that's the exercise. That's how I've adapted it to make it work for them, which means that there's basically 10 times people are speaking and feeling heard and so on, and get that around with the 3 people or the 4. Each has gotten a couple of times at least to experience that. Then I debrief. And like in everything in business, we need to have. So I will ask them to talk about specifically what was useful in the content that was around this question, which I'll show in a moment. And then the second piece of the debrief, which of course is the most interesting one, which is about the format. What did they experience in this moment? And I give them this question, which is how could empathy drive my business, and how to create a more empathic culture in my business. That's what they talk about for the 30 minutes. These are the things that typically come out in terms of the results, if you will, the outcomes. They talk about the awareness of how poor their listening skills are. It's even sufficient in 30 minutes for that to happen. How often they want to, like I think it was Edwin was saying, want to interrupt someone else. They're already starting to think about what they're already talking, how they want to respond. There's also another thing which I'd like to add, Edwin, to your introduction of empathy, is empathy as a speaker. Because we often, the issue often is that when you're the CEO, everyone is expecting you to have empathy. But sometimes there should be the opportunity for the speaker to have empathy for the listener, and also for the employees to have empathy for the boss, even though they're the ones earning the big bucks. We talk about the bonds that are created, even in the 30 minutes, the special feeling of actually being heard by somebody who's focusing on what I'm saying, how the reformulation helps me to actually get to the bottom of what I'm trying to say. It's amazing how often people, words that comes out of their mouth aren't actually the ones that most represent what they meant. And in this process of reformulation, they come up with that. And also this collective intelligence. In 30 minutes, they're systematically surprised by how much they get out of it, as opposed to having done this individually with a blank sheet of paper on this question. There are a few things that I like to impose or tell them about when trying to bring empathy into the business. The first is empathy does use an important resource. It's not necessarily free, unlike what I think some people tend to believe. It requires your energy, your concentration, and the other one, which is supremely important in business, which is your time. Of course, it can save time. It can do many things for you, but you also need to be able to apply yourself and be ready to have that resource, that allocation of concentration and attention and time for the person or the persons you're listening to. I also tend to suggest that they have permission not to try to be empathic all the time with everybody in every situation. We have to stop being dogmatic about this and allow them to know that they are also imperfect beings and not expect to be perfectly empathic. As an author of a book, and those of you who also have written might also get those feelings sometimes when my wife, for example, says, well, that wasn't very empathic of you, Minter. I thought you knew all about it. Well, yeah, but it's very difficult to be empathic all the time. And then as getting into the self-awareness in the organization, how empathic are they already? I encourage them to start practicing empathy outside, especially at home, but also with strangers. And then when it comes to the work piece, if they're not a very empathic organization, like the one I worked for 16 years, maybe focus where you want to drive your empathy according to strategic priorities in your organization, which helps focus the mind in business and make you a little bit more keen to practice empathy in business. I'm just going to finish for the last 3 minutes that I have talking about Redken, where I was the CEO for a few years. I don't know if any of you know it. It's a hairdresser brand selling hair color and shampoos. And I had an extraordinary experience there. So when I talk about bringing empathy into the culture, I talk a lot about this inside out model, which means that you need to start modeling the behavior in the very core piece of your business. So that starts with you, Mr. and Mrs. CEO, your executive team, and then modeling that out throughout, rippling out throughout the organization and your channel, let's say, of distribution, where you have in the beginning the business, and then outside you might have your business to business customers, your distributors, then finally the clients, the end customers who are using it. So try to have a culture that has consistency and coherence from the inside out. And I frequently talk about trying to align what you're trying to do inside your company with what you're trying to do outside the company. People get very focused on what they're trying to do outside because that's where the money is, getting the customers happy. But you should start with that, having that culture internally with your own employees before expecting them to be empathic with your customers. And I'm going to finish with this PIE model. In French, it's P, which is the magpie, but it's also the pie in English, PIE, which stands for personal, internal, external. And it's consistent with my inside out model. You need to start with empathy personally. And one of the things that frequently comes out of my seminars is the opportunity to be more empathic at home with my children, with my spouse, friends, because that's also about being consistent, being coherent as an individual. And then internally with your inside your company, and then externally towards your external stakeholders. And I talk about you were talking about Meryl Streep. Was that Felicia talking about Meryl Streep? Or someone was talking about, or that was you, Edwin. But the idea of reading fiction. These are different ideas as to how to improve your empathic skills, practice active listening at home, and try to get over this thing called the communication the bias of close communication, where you tend to forget to listen to people you know for a long time because you think you already know what they're already saying. Chat with strangers. When you're having difficulties with someone, think about identifying. Frequently promote the idea of practicing meditation and needing to be present, which again is a resource you need to use sometimes in order to be able to be empathic. These are the characteristics of being an empathic leader. This was from a survey in Business Solver. But the way I used to do it when I was at Redken, and CEO as being fair and firm. And very often people mistake empathy as being weak and being rolling over. I think of empathy as being fair and firm in what I believe. It's not about being rolling over. That's it. And these are my books. And most recently, I did a collaborative book called Making Empathy Count, which was done with a woman called Lena Orencevich. And my other book is called Heartificial Empathy. And of course, in the center of You Lead is this notion of an empathic leader. You see, now my ringer's on. I'm finished.
Wow, Minter, I want to thank you for your patience, and that was really insightful listening to you. Collective intelligence, so many words of wisdom. Thank you.